born the youngest of 6 children on April 23, 1968, in Fresno, California. Aileen Rodriguez grew up on a 4-acre subsistence farm. Described as tomboyish, climbing trees, changing tires, running and biking. Her father did not teach the family Spanish for fear of discrimination. Aileen has always shown an interest in art, creating work as a child from whatever materials she could find.
Through my art, I express the emotions and experiences I encounter in my life. I feel a great need to put into visual form images which reflect my joys and struggles. Sometimes I find inspiration comes from within my dreams. Probably the most interesting aspect of the whole process for me is that I feel compelled to form these images to gain release from them. I have to experience a psychological and physical purging. Otherwise, they continue to reappear in my thoughts. My impressions of what I have been through greatly influence the way I express myself in art. I want the viewer to feel a sense of shared experience.
The majority of my work is so personal that it usually takes me to a more darker end of my personality. So I'll tend to gravitate more towards watching things that put me in that frame of mind. And when I go through the process, then it's a very exhausting thing because I'm exposing a part of myself, my own experience, and to go there puts you back in that frame of mind again. I try to do some form of meditation to clear my mind of everything first and try to get rid of all the other distractions as much as I can. This also helps me visualize the work I'm about to start. Gives me a chance to focus my energies where they need to be and put my mind in the right mood for where I want to go. For me, working on the art itself is the most personal journey. It gives me that opportunity to express something very personal about myself and put it in a form that others then will see. It's that process that is the most important thing for me to go through. Once I feel like I've created an image that expresses what I wanted to say and I feel good about it, then I can let it go and I can move on as a person and I can go to the next thing and I can feel okay about what I'm doing next.
As Aileen grew, she sought out art classes and continued her focus through her study at CSU Fresno, graduating with a BA in art design. Aileen created and sold her own artwork during the 1990s while she was employed by the Fresno Bee as a graphic artist. As the requests for her art became greater, Aileen made the decision to resign her position with the Fresno Bee and become a professional fine artist.
Even as a child, I think I knew I wanted to, because when I was a little child, I can remember drawing my own little cartoon strips, just because I wanted to do something artistic. I can remember still doing something just naturally as an instinct, just going towards creating something, anything. And so that seed was always there, and once I got older and had the ability to go and visit museums on my own and see the artwork that I really enjoyed and would just take my breath away, I thought, this is something I really want to do, and this is something I can do. And so I would spend my time figuring out, how am I going to do this? And I went to school and learned, and I went to talk to other artists and figured out, okay, what do I need to do? How can I make this happen? And then it was again going back to just my own personal style and thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to express it? And so it was developing, and I still do that to this day. It's a constant evolution of how my work comes across and the kind of work that I put out. And so it's really the process, the time that I'm in studio, where I feel the most me. It's always worked well for me. How I want to attack the canvas first. If I want to draw or if I want to just start painting. But the first step is usually the same, and that's just taking the black gesso and turning what is white into black.
On January 25, 1992, Aileen married Tony Imperatrice, a music minister at their church. And as with many marriages, they had their ups and downs. Tony has remained a staunch supporter of his wife in her artistic career.
This painting comes from a time when I was in the hospital with my husband. He had a polycystic kidney disease, and one of the cysts on the outside of his kidney ruptured, which caused internal bleeding for several days, and we did not know this until he was in such pain that I rushed him to the emergency room, and they had told us that it was more serious than we thought. And for 10 days we were at St. Agnes. I was sitting by his side the entire time while they were telling me that he was most likely not going to make it. I felt that I was going to be a widow at 34, so it was a time where I really had to process what we had been through before I knew that I could put something in visual form. A lot of the paintings that I did through this series, which was called Self-Portraits, I created paintings that focused on chairs that represented something I had been through and something I've experienced emotionally. So in this particular painting, Tony would have been in the bed, and then myself, I'm sitting by his side in the chair. And the chair, you'll notice, has two different levels of legs. The bottom level relates to the fact that I had to maintain some kind of stability in what was going on around me, keeping track of what the doctors were telling me and making decisions on behalf of Tony. But at the same time, the majority of myself was otherwise lifted because I was so emotionally drained, I was exhausted from no sleep and going through all the emotions that you have when you have your loved one almost dying. Visiting hours do not apply is the first piece and only piece that I did relating to that particular experience, and it was something that I had to come to feel that I could put together in a visual form. So it's very personal, but it also expresses something that was monumental in my life and I needed to express in a visual form. So when I'm finally ready to start on a piece, I usually come to it with some sketches of things that I've already thought about incorporating, and then a lot of ideas that are just in my head that I want to think about a little bit more before I put on canvas or how I want to make them work. I'm allowing some of those images and ideas that strike my attention push through and come out of my subconscious, come out of my dreams, that will be in layers. Some you'll see better than others, and things might even completely disappear. Going to be images that are fluid in my thinking. With recent events in my personal life, I've been thinking even more about what happens to us while we're here and what we hold on to and what makes us human. And I think some of the images that have really been coming through in my thoughts have been based on what it means to be a human being. I know in my last series I was focusing on what it meant to be female and a lot of the pressures that we have in society, what we have to conform to and what we choose to actually embrace. With that in mind, I'm also thinking then of just as a human being, how we push through different events in our lives and what makes our human experience unique, depending on what we have to bear in our own life cycle, and then what we choose to embrace and other things that we choose to let go of. And there's a piece that I still have of mine that I did when I was in junior high, and it was done with crushed pastel chalk because that was the only thing I had available to me. And I made it into a paint by adding water to it. And that piece was actually a dark piece, and it was something that I did just because that was what I was going through at the time. I would just do anything that came across my mind. It would be anything from flowers to people to whatever, and it would usually also be depending on a particular show that I was invited to be a part of. Once I started showing more when I was out of college, I had more invitations to do things, and as I was working at the Fresno Bee, I saw those invites to do shows coming more frequently. And I had to decide at that point then, did I want to be a full-time artist or did I want to continue? And I decided to go into full-time fine arts. Once I started doing that as my main profession, that's when I really got to explore where I wanted to take my work, what type of an artist I wanted to be, how I wanted my work to look like. So I started really looking at the different things that other artists were doing, and I was inspired by some of the things that I saw going more towards the challenging experimental art than more towards the traditional arts. Locally, one of the artists that I consider a mentor is Robert Ogata, and he has done an incredible lifetime of work, and watching his progression and knowing that he has been able to rise to quite a level of recognition for local artists, I certainly admire that and have had many conversations with him and had him reviewing my work so that I know I've had some constructive criticism on what I'm doing.
One of the documentaries is about Andy Warhol. It's a documentary that I always fall back to watching again because I really admired his ability to integrate his artist life with the business part of art. And that's something I still strive to do every day. It's a difficult balance because business side of art is such a integrated thing of knowing how to talk with people, the connections you make, and how to sell your work. And then the creative side of the art, of course, is getting back into the mood you need to be in to do the work and connecting with your work and creating authentic work. So it's a difficult balancing act. And when I watch the Andy Warhol documentary, it reminds me of how someone was able to do that. Another one of the documentaries that I'll watch is Frida Kahlo, and her work in particular is the one that I most identify with because she specifically did work that was very personal, and it expressed a lot of the pains and challenges that she had gone through in her own life. And what I do in my work is I try to do the same thing by expressing what I've been through, putting that into the piece in some symbolic form, and then letting people respond to that however they may. The other person is Jackson Pollock, and in particular expresses how he was dealing with his own personal demons and how he was able to still channel that into doing some really incredible work. And I think we all have to, as artists, do that to a certain level because we have different experiences that were challenging or that were good, or anything that we come across, we use that in our art. And with Jackson Pollock in particular, he had a very challenging life and had to deal with some very specific demons, and was able to put that into his work in such a way that changed the way that people looked at art. After the series in 2006, Self-Portraits, the next series was Trapped in Transition. And that was a continuation of the chairs, but in a form that was showing how I felt at the time my career was going to the next level, was going through a transition of sorts because I wanted to become an artist that was represented by a gallery. So I needed to take my art to another level. I could see that on the horizon, the things that I needed to do in the business part of my career. And the transition that I was going through as an artist was what I chose to express through those art pieces. The following year, I did a series called Letters to Myself, and that was based on a lot of thoughts that I've had written down, because as I'm working on my art, it's not only just visual images that I'll jot down, but even just words that trigger a memory or words that trigger a visual idea that I want to put into a piece. And I have a lot of writer and poet friends that I regularly have chats with, and their words too also feed me, and that's why I like to go to a lot of their events. So I decided to create a series where I actually had writing in the paintings themselves. And so it took the visual arts to another level, because then it wasn't just the symbol that you were looking at, it was also the words that went along with that. There was one piece in particular called What Is My Worth that continues to get a lot of attention because it deals with how we as an individual feel about ourselves based on how other people tell us that we are valued. And for me personally, I've gone through a lot of struggles with that within my own circle, that I felt like I needed to get that out, saying it doesn't matter what you say or what you think, I'm going to feel about myself the way I do. And I feel value in what I do, and I take it from there. The following year, I did a couple of different series. I did a little pop art series in between, and that was kind of like my ode to my person that I admire, Andy Warhol. And then also I did another series that was called Shifting Boundaries. Just prior to that series, I had been exposed to a lot of abstract art. And there were some collectors here in Fresno that invited me to their houses and would show me their collection. And I was really influenced by the way that there was a lot of freedom in abstract art. And I have, previous to that, done a lot of representational images. Even though they were more general symbols and they weren't down to the detail, it was still something that you could recognize. And I really liked the idea of experimenting with being more abstract and letting people have a chance to absorb it however they absorb it in a different manner. And so I took a chance and did a whole series that, although I had some symbols represented in there, they weren't obvious to what they were. And I like to do a general swath of more abstract feel to the whole piece. And so that's what I did that series about. And then after that, the following year, I did a series called Rituals. And that one came back to a lot of different things. My traditional background, I have a lot of ties to the heritage of Mexico and dealing with altars. I myself have done altars on Dia de los Muertos every year in my own home, and I've even done some for Arte Americas. And so I gravitate towards the spiritual aspect of that. I have a strong religious background growing up, and the images that I have left over from that, going to church, seeing the altars, seeing all the different iconography, it really fed back into wanting to explore how that's affected me personally. The idea behind the images that I ended up creating were dealing with the rituals we as human beings do in our daily lives. Some rituals overtake our lives, and others we do because we enjoy them. And so there's that struggle between endurance and enjoyment. And each of the pieces that I did related to one thing or another that had to deal with the rituals that we take on as human beings and how we choose to relate to those. And then the overall pieces were very similar because it was the ritualistic process of creating each piece and then going down to what the final symbol was that went in it. Following that, I did a series called Icons, which was a little mini series that I did for Rogue Festival. And during that time, one of my little dogs had passed away, and I did a piece that was immediately reflective of her. And then I did a number of pieces that dealt with things that I've held as some kind of level of importance and significance in my life, and that's why they were icons to me. They were fun things like everything from a sock monkey to religion to media to every other aspect of my life that has some major significance. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about visual artists is that we are so into our own heads that we can't talk about our work. It's true that when we are working on the art itself, we need to be where we are for the studio. But once we have our work done, once we're showing it to the public, we like to engage with the viewer. We like to answer questions. We like to talk about the work. And if people want to genuinely know about something, if they ask us a question, we'll talk to them about it. We do enjoy talking about art, and that's why it's such a huge part of our lives. We like to engage with other people about it, and that's why we tend to have friendships that are other creative people, because they can all relate to each other going through the process of creating something new, or even just putting on a new character or something. It's all a part of a creative process, and we relate to each other in that way. But even just the general public who are not artists, it's a way for us to connect to you when you want to ask us about the work, or even if you want to just talk about art in general. It gives us a chance to share a little bit about ourselves and what is going on in our heads. And so we like to talk about things. I think most artists are considered the little struggling artists that are in the corner, and somebody has to discover us, and we're not capable of directing our own lives, basically. But that's not the case. I know a lot of artists who are very proactive in their marketing and their business side of their art, and that's how they become successful. And it's necessary in this day and age when there's so much out there that you have to contend with, and there's a lot of things that you need to do to promote yourself, that every artist needs to know that and needs to know how to do that. So I think there's that misconception that they think that artists are still just kind of these lone figures in the studio and they don't get out in the world and know how to relate to the world. We do, just not during the time when we're working on our art. So it's that separation between when we're working and focused on the art itself and then outside of that, how we share our work. So,
Define visual art for me.
visual art is a sense of expression of yourself. And even the people who do still lifes, do landscapes, do things that are identifiable to everyone, they're expressing their own view of the world. It's their way of showing what they see in the way that they choose to do it. So a visual artist is a person who will take their own life experience, will take what they are exposed to and put it in a form that then someone else can look at it and say, okay, this is my life experience, but I can relate to this piece because of that. And I think visual art is all about a form of expression. It's just like any other art where you're doing music or theater or film or anything. You're trying to get across a point of view. You're trying to show your view, your perspective of the world in a form that relates to you, something you like to do, and then someone else can look at it and get something out of it themselves. There's so many different times where I've shown a piece that I knew what went into making it. I knew what I had in mind when I was putting that together, and then someone else will come along and look at it and have some other completely different thought about it. And I love that because that's them bringing their own experience to it and still seeing something they can relate about it. And that means so much more to me than even what I had intended for in the first place, because then it means that it means more than just what I said. It is a grander view, and someone else then can feel something about it and connect to it on a different level. And that's really what you hope for as an artist. Artist to Artist is a show that I'm creating to show the kinds of conversations that happen between artists. As a visual artist myself, I regularly go visit my friends who are visual artists to see their work and to see the shows that they put together. I use that for inspiration for myself. We love to do a lot of shop talk about what we're doing and techniques and new things that we're doing with the art. And those are the kinds of conversations I think people would be interested to hear, to see what it is that we talk about. And so I thought about putting that on camera. There was a little bit of a preview that I had done about a year ago after my husband gave me a little flip cam for Christmas. And I went out and just started shooting video of my friends who are all involved in creative projects. And it was running the gamut of things. It was people who did filmmaking, who did music and theater. And then one evening for the Art Hop in January of 2011, January of 2012, I was invited by some friends of mine who are journalists to accompany them on the Art Hop on Thursday night. And so I brought my camera with me, thought, well, this will be fun. It's friends and myself who are going to visit people. And I just shot a lot of the shows that were happening at that night and talking to individual artists that were showing their work. And I posted that on YouTube and showed some of my friends, and I got such a great response from that. People thought that was really a unique thing to see an artist talking to other artists and asking the kinds of questions that maybe regular people wouldn't know to ask about techniques and about how they're presenting the show and how they feel about their work. And so what I felt that I could do from that is to make it a more professional show. I knew that I couldn't do that with just a little flip cam. Once CMAC opened, I came to look at the type of facilities they had, and I knew this was a place that I could do that. So I started to take the classes, and I learned how to use the equipment and put together the idea of how to do the show. I'd been lucky enough to already meet with a couple of artists to have those conversations with, and those will be the first couple of episodes, and then from then I'll be meeting with other artists in studio and just showing their work and talking about art in general and how we survive as artists and why we do what we do. It's really a great chance to get into the artist's mind to see why it is that we want to create art in the first place and how it is that we are energized by doing that. And a lot of it too is how we have those conversations with each other encourages how we do our work. I know that when I'm feeling a little lost in what I'm doing, or if I feel like I want to try something different, I will go and seek out other artists' shows to give me inspiration on what I'm doing. And it's hard to relate to everybody in the normal sense that you are My personality drastically changes when I'm in my studio working on my art, and it's because I need to be in the mind space that I need for that particular piece. And it's hard. It's sort of like, I think, an actor where they have to change into a type of personality that the character that they're trying to do is. So they have to focus on doing that, and then to be able to let go of that at the end of the day and go back to normal life. It's sort of like that for a visual artist. If you're really connecting with your work, if you're trying to create something authentic to the experience that you've gone through, you have to put yourself in that same experience, that feeling again. And so since then, I've done other more personal related items dealing with issues that I've had with my family, issues I've had with myself, issues I've had with the world, and just taking that to a visual form so that others can see what I'm going through and hopefully relate to it somehow so they have a way of expressing it themselves. And beyond what happens after that, I can't control it anyway. I just need to do what I have to do, and that's getting that out, purging that feeling, going with that emotion and being willing to expose a part of myself that is uniquely me. And that's the thing that's been so remarkable to me is the conversations I've had with viewers in looking at a particular piece. They'll come and share such a personal story with me. I know that that's touched them in some way. I know that's given them an outlet that they wouldn't ordinarily have. And if that's something I can do as a bonus, you know, that's great. I never expected that. And that was where I said, okay, this is what I need to keep doing. Since the process of creating my work is such a personal journey, there are times where I need to actually step away from the work. If I need to refigure how I'm doing something, or if I just need to step away because it's become such emotionally draining process that I need to take a break. It also gives me a chance to just stop and take a breath and think about what it is I am working on and where I need to be. A chance to clear my thoughts so I'm not boggled down by the process to where I don't get out what it is I need to say.
I have never done a self-portrait. I hadn't felt it was appropriate or necessary. With my first series, once I knew that the chair would represent me and help me express the many parts of my life experience, I knew these would be my self-portraits.